Right, hello, nice to see you. So it's really nice to have something with actual people here, not just all online, but welcome anyway from my point of view. I'm called rather strangely the Oxbridge coordinator, as though Oxbridge is so uncoordinated that even I can make it better. And that's not really the role. It's actually quite a small role, but I'll say a little bit by way of a sort of an apologia for what I do as to why you would need anything special for Oxbridge. And the answer is they are a little bit different. So they're a bit different from other universities. And there are certain things that we have to be more careful about or different. So why Oxbridge? Well, they're two of the top 10 universities in the world on almost every measure. It's a possible fantastic opportunity. And what we're trying to do as a college, as individuals, as people, is to provide the best opportunities for the students that come here. And so we do lots of different things. So I don't spend all my time thinking about Oxbridge. For some people, it's individual help with something that they're stuck on. For other people, it's something more stretching. But because they're different in many ways, we do sometimes have to think what extra support is needed specifically for those and what extra information is there. I'm going to go over to the other side because I find if I look towards that to remind myself what I'm saying, I move away from my microphone, so I'll do that. So most of what we do for people going to Oxbridge is just the same as we do for people doing other academic courses and other university things. So lots of detailed help with your subject, with extraordinary extras, with opportunities for doing more things. But there are one or two things that we have to do specially. So your tutors and your teachers will be providing lots of help, but because not everybody goes to Oxbridge, it's a small number of people who do, they may not have had anybody studying that subject or applying for that subject for several years, and so they may not be familiar with all the extra things needed. So I can act as a repository of information, mostly as a link saying, go on this website because that's where it is. So collecting and passing on information is one of the things I do. The main aim, I think I would say, is to make sure that there is no barrier for students. Okay, so what we want is to make sure that everybody has the chance of doing the best they possibly can. And we know from national figures that often, people who've been to Eton think it's the natural thing to go on to Oxford, and people who've been to other places don't. And they just think, oh, no, that's not for people like me. But it is. It's for people who have those interests in those courses and that ability. And those universities are bending over backwards where they can to get good students from any walk of life and people who will benefit from the sort of courses they offer. So it's actually several years ago, but it just sums up what I'm hoping to achieve. And that's from an email from a student saying, I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for the Oxbridge group. As a result, I did. He went to Merton to read history and was also one of their outreach students encouraging other people to go from not only New College, but all the people around, sort of thing. I'm very successful there. So I want to say, have a go. Think of it as a possibility. It's not right for everybody. Of the people who have a go, lots won't get in. Most of the people who apply to Oxford don't get in. Most of the people who apply to Cambridge don't get in. But they nearly always get into some good university. And there's not the fact that, if all your if you really wanted to apply to Cambridge and you don't get in, then your hopes are dashed to the ground. A few years ago, I had a very good student for computer science, and he applied to Cambridge and he didn't get in, and he went. I asked for the feedback after the interview. They asked him for an interview and said, they said, I said, what did he do right? What did he do wrong? And they said, well, looking over the notes, he did just about everything right. We thought he was really good, but unfortunately there were other people who were even better. But if it's any consolation to him, he was interviewed by two leading experts in their field, and both of them didn't get into Cambridge. They both applied for undergraduate courses. They didn't get in, but they got in later. They did PhDs and things there, having gone to other universities, and their careers weren't in any way hampered by that. So don't worry, lots of superb students don't get in. We don't want it just to be a thing of saying, this is a cliff edge. You put everything into getting into these universities, and that's what matters. There are masses of opportunities for students. It isn't only Oxbridge. And lots of the things we do to help people get into Oxford or Cambridge are just the same as we would be doing to help them get into other courses that they want to do. So I can point in the right direction. We can give specific help, subject support for the special things. So they do have quite a lot of extra tests. I'll say a bit more about that later. If you want to go in at this time, those tests are being applied for. If you want to apply to Oxford and Cambridge this year, you are 50 minutes too late. okay, because the deadline was 6 p.m. today. In a way, I'm rather relieved because there are students sort of changing their mind at the last minute, and it's quite nice to know we have actually finalized everything there. But preparation for the tests, bit of help with that. Preparation for interviews. If you apply to do medicine almost anywhere, then you will have an interview, and that will be part of the selection process for getting into a medicine degree. But for most degrees, at most universities now, interview isn't part of the selection process, but it's very important for Oxford and Cambridge, and therefore people want to do as well as possible, and we can provide some help with that. Okay, what all top universities are looking for? Academic potential. That's the real thing. They want people who are really interested in their subject and have got the potential to do really well at. And that's not just Oxford and Cambridge, it's everybody, and that's the key thing. So they'll look at good GCSE results. So should you be working for your GCSEs? It will be very helpful if you do very well. They will put them in context. Many people applying to those things have 12 grade 9s at GCSE. Not all by any means. If you've got more modest GCSEs, then if you haven't done as well as other people at your school, then they may well that's going to be a factor. They won't rule you out. On the other hand, if your school nobody got terribly good GCSEs, and you say, well, I got some 7s and some 8s, and I was actually one of the very best in my school, they will know that. They will have the figures for that, and they will therefore say, on the whole, people who come here have brilliant GCSEs. The fact that this person has got slightly less good ones doesn't necessarily mean there's anything limiting about him or her. It may be the school, so we will look at other criteria. So they look at them in context. They will look for outstanding A-level performance, so some of the courses require A star, A, some of them a bit less. It's usually higher in the sciences, not because it's easier to get in the sciences, but because I think they think that the difference between A star and A is more reliable in the sciences. It's often thought to be a little bit subjective in some of the arts things, and so they say it's not always the best history students who get the A star. It is usually, but not always, so they don't make that so much a criterion, but there are other strict criteria. Interest in your subject, that's really important. And outside interests, very important in life, but they aren't a big thing for getting into Oxford or Cambridge, partly because they say if you make all those things very important, then schools that have a very big cultural program will be at an advantage, and we will get more people from those students who aren't necessarily the cleverest, and it's not necessarily the fairest way of doing it. So if you play the cello brilliantly, that's wonderful, but it won't get you a place there. It won't be a selection criterion. Obviously, if you show that you can manage your time to do lots of things, that is going to be important for doing well at university, so that may well help. Okay? So things that are relevant to your study. It used to be the case 15 years ago that if you wanted to apply to Oxford, it was really helpful to have somebody who really knew the ropes and could say, this is important and that isn't, and so on. And now that's not really true, so I could just go home because everything is online. There's no information that I can get that you can't. Okay, so I spend a lot of time saying to students, look at the website, go through it carefully. You used to have to fill in special application forms, now you don't. Though if you apply to Cambridge after you've applied with an ordinary university application to that and other things, then they'll send you a questionnaire, and that will include things like what topics have you done so far, because if they're going to have an interview, they'd rather ask you questions about topics that you have studied than topics you haven't studied. You could play the game. Some years ago I had a student who was at an interview, and he was asked, he was talking to the person who came out of the interview and said, what did they ask you? And they said, oh, they asked me a really difficult question about integration and a really easy one about probability. So when he went in and said, what have you been studying recently at school? He said, well, unfortunately, our teacher's been ill, so we haven't done any integration recently. We've been rather concentrating on probability. He didn't get in, actually, but he was a lively student. Okay, early application still required, so the deadline is today. It's a real deadline. It's quite different from when your teachers say you have a deadline and you haven't got round to doing the work and you persuade them, oh, come on, give me another day, and that's fine. If you go to Oxford and say, it's 10 to 7 on 6, I'm applying now, what can I do if I missed the deadline because it wasn't really my fault? They will say, well, what you can do is you can apply next year. It's actually, they have so many applications, they don't need to be flexible on that. Lots of tests. So here's a test for you. Can you work out what all of those stand for? I don't think I can. BMAT is the biomedical aptitude test, used by lots of other things, and used for medicine degrees. TSA is the Thinking Skills Assessment. ELAT is the English and Languages Aptitude Test. LNAT is the law one, but I can't remember what the N stands for. STEP is the 6th term entry paper, which is only used for maths now. NSA is the Natural Sciences Aptitude Assessment, I think. The History Aptitude Test, the Physics Aptitude Test, and so on. And all of those tests have to be done at about this time. Masses them on November the 4th. They were all going to be on November the 4th, but they've changed it for COVID, so they're over 2 days now. You have to apply by now. And Oxford uses them for most of its subjects. Cambridge uses them more and more. Some subjects have tests that you have to do on November the 4th or 5th, and some have tests that you do when you go up to interview. But we provide preparation for those and help. I had an email just an hour ago from somebody saying, I really don't know how to do these questions. I've looked at this was a past paper for the MAT, which isn't there, the Maths Aptitude Test. And he said, I don't know how to do that. Could you give me some help? And I was just trying to work out some help from him when I got another email saying, actually, they're going through it on the live stream help thing from Oxford University, and so I don't need you, thanks very much. He didn't put it like that, but it was and I was really pleased because as well as providing individual help, so I will help people with individual problems, we're also trying to provide the widest range of things, and one of the things is that the universities themselves provide help for this, and so I put him in touch and said, if on a Thursday you've got a problem, and even if you haven't, I strongly recommend at 4:30 go on the live stream and you can see how experts from Oxford say you should tackle these problems. And that sorted him out, helped him with this one. A lot of those tests are used by other universities as well. Okay, programme of events. This is what we usually do. It's not what we're doing this year. Okay, it's probably what we'll be doing next year, but who knows? Okay, so we've had sort of 5 things, and we have an introduction encouraging people to think about their options and so on, providing help with the application process, thinking about open days, summer schools, what other opportunities there are, checking that everything's on track. We had an interview workshop preparing for interviews in November. That's after people applied, when most of them know whether they've got an interview or not. We try and do that. This year, they're not coming to do interview workshops, but there is an online interview workshop that Oxford is using. And we don't know about Cambridge whether there's anything on that, but we will provide some help with interviews anyway. We'll always give people practice interviews, but it's quite nice to get help from the experts directly from the university, and lots of individual help and advice. A lot of the time my job seems to be answering emails, and quite a lot of the time my job seems to be sending out emails and not getting any answers back myself. So if you want to apply to Oxford or Cambridge or get involved in this sort of thing, and you get a message, do answer it. It's really nice. It makes me feel wanted. Okay, academic options. So those are some of the things that help students to have the widest range of opportunity that we offer. Many other people do, but I think we do particular things. So a wide range of A-levels, opportunity to do 4 A-levels if you're able enough, and that works very well for some people, doesn't well for everybody. Particular subject support, so I'm going to talk a little bit about maths because that's what I do a lot of the time. Okay, we used to, when it was modular, we used to offer extra modules for that. Now, the Senior Maths Challenge just coming up in a couple of weeks' time. That's a sort of multiple choice, interesting questions on maths. You may have done the intermediate one at school. You may have done the senior one at school. The Maths Team Challenge, not happening this year, sadly. MOG, that's the Maths Olympiad for girls. Why is there a Maths Olympiad for girls? Well, because not enough girls enter these competitions, and they tend to be dominated by boys, and people thought there are lots of brilliant girl mathematicians, and we don't want to deny them the opportunities, so we will have a bit of extra effort to encourage them to apply. And we had lots of people doing this year, which is the first time we've had more than 1 or 2, so that was really nice. The Advanced Maths Support Programme Problem Solving course, I used to teach on that for this region, but that's all gone online for this year, so I don't know about that. Able Mathematicians course we run, that's a sort of lunchtime session that I have for 10 or 11 sessions where I introduce people to interesting ideas, well, they may have met before, about infinity and chaos theory and is there a fourth dimension? If there is, what can you do with it? And bits about logic and so on, paradoxes, all sorts of different things. All the stuff that is really interesting but really difficult to put in exams. So it isn't in the A-level course, but it is mind-stretching. In fact, I should have updated this because I've renamed it the mind-stretching course. Okay, and that's in the middle. Weekly puzzles haven't got going this year, but last year I put that up and lots of people were really interested to work out what comes next. So I'll leave that as a puzzle for you if you want to know. The next 3 numbers is quite a challenge. I looked at it, I couldn't do it, but I have done it now. And I put at the end of this, so that I don't forget it, there are lots of different enrichment things for able students, and Connie's talking about most of them, but one other that's not run specifically by her is what's called the medical health package. And so I was asked to just say a tiny bit about it, and it will be a tiny bit, now run by Sam, a chemistry teacher, and it's meeting weekly, regularly. And again, if you're applying for medicine, there are lots of special things that you need. Okay, you need to think about what work experience you can do. You need to think about the different skills that you need to build up and so on. So those are provided in the medical health pathway generally, but there's a specific help for people thinking of applying for medicine, dentistry, vets, and so on. Visiting experts come and give talks, and again, you have a coordinator of that, somebody who picks up over the years different things that are really helpful for students and tries to make sure that everybody knows about them. Okay, so I think I have waffled on long enough, but hope you've got something out of it, and do ask me more questions later. I'll pass on to Connie. I think I'll probably find I've got 4 more slides to talk about, but I think I will pass on to Connie in a moment, and she coordinates a general program for high flyers, so covers a much wider range than I do. I'm really ought to be just a small part of her empire. Okay. Oh, I was wrong. I have got 1 more slide. And I wasn't going to say anything about that, just that those are among the enrichments. Those are things that can make a real difference to students. Some of them, like being in a sports team, won't make much difference to your chance of getting into Cambridge, but they are very valuable. Some of them will make a difference to your chance of getting into things there. And the ones we're specifically talking about, Connie's going to talk about, I hope, bingo.